to phonemic awareness. So they listen and hear sounds, hopefully that are familiar to them individually, and they can begin to understand that that is associated with a certain symbol, and that opens to them a greater understanding of how reading and literacy and writing all happen. So both in terms of decoding and encoding at any level, both for beginning and proficient students, it does demand that the learners be strategic and active as they learn and practice. And I believe in the early videos that, and the little bits that were shown before the conference began, those were illustrated very nicely. And I'd encourage anyone to go to the website and the Rainbow Foundation and see how the children are being taught. And these all are very illustrative of that. Next slide, please. It's very important that dyslexia not be seen as a disability, but rather it is a condition. And in terms of the definition of dyslexia, International Dyslexia Association does call it a neurological condition. However, it also says that children and students can learn to cope through different strategies. There are different coping strategies that we can model to students and help them utilize them. Also, very important, it has nothing to do with intelligence. Some very intelligent people have dyslexia, and it's very important also to give parents this idea that it is not something negative. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is simply a condition that one can work with and can develop various strategies. So teachers, parents, but also administrators need to help them understand how to promote self-esteem by building what are often called executive function, also called metacognitive strategy training. And so this is one of my bottom lines, and I'll be getting to that in a moment. Next, please. So we look at children and we wonder, are they dyslexic or confused? This is a quick question for all of us, because a child who is confused can look very much like a dyslexic child because you can't really tell the difference. So what one needs to do with a confused child is simply to give them gentle lessons on things like directionality. We've looked at graphic spatial kinds of things, looking at the situation more in developmental terms, because children who are simply confused or lost, if you will eventually outgrow that developmentally. And that they learn that often from peers and watching others and learning through different strategies. But for others, we can also screen, and there are certain diagnoses, such as miscue analysis, that give you a window into the learner's specific needs and what their preferred learning style is. Some children learning style is simply the way you prefer to learn, and that's an important aspect to keep in mind. Some struggle with unfamiliar sounds, especially, when they're coming at it from another dialect or another regional language. So that's why you would have to use their language as much as possible to have them understand that that sound that they're making, or that combination of sounds, looks like this in graphic representation. So overall, try to be very sensitive to the linguistic diversity in your classrooms. It is paramount. Next one. So different needs for different students. Younger students learn by doing, older students learn by doing. But in addition, young students need lots of tangible input, lots of hands-on manipulatives, as you saw also in the Rainbow videos. And I, again, would like to encourage you to look at them because I learned a lot by watching. And then also, older students also need a logic. Why do I need to learn this? What do I believe about myself as a learner? And a lot of this can also be learned through metacognitive strategies. And one gains better control of their literacy that way. Next, please. And so just to quickly illustrate this, I saw on the website, the Rainbow Foundation. So these are wonderful things that are right in tune with what I'm talking about. Next, please. I'm hurrying through my slides to make sure that my time is well used. Strategic learning depends both on task as well as the learner. In terms of a task, a writing system impacts the steepness of the learning curve when you're trying to decode and encode a language. So if you have a different type of task, say a complex one, it will demand different strategies from the learner. And transparent writing systems like Indonesian are wonderful because they do provide an easy entry into literacy. However, of course, for a dyslexic child, you still need to focus on different strategies for them so that that could be eased a little bit more, but it is doable. Whereas learning English, which is an opaque writing system, and oh my goodness, the trajectory there is far steeper and the strategies have to be more complex. That is fine because actually older learners and we ourselves as professors and so on do layer our strategies and combine them, and that's important in terms of multimodal, multiple complex strategies, bundling those together in order to attack any kind of a literacy situation. Learning style, again, is the leaning or the tendency you have where you prefer certain ways of learning, and that's very important with dyslexic students to learn, especially if they're learning biliteracy, learning two languages. It will require potent strategies for them to work those out in concert with their particular learning style. Next, please. So learning style could be visual, it could be spatial, it could be very social, that some students really need that in order to learn better. But two key tenets are that learners come with rich funds of knowledge, which I hope I've already stressed, and your job as teachers is to build on that. So if the foundation is a different language or a different dialect, you're still building on that. And also to work together with the learner to discover and choose strategies that match their needs and styles. In learning how a learner learns, you pretty much put yourself into the shoes of that learner and try to think the way they're thinking and trying to solve the puzzle of literacy. Proven teaching strategies include being very explicit, taking things step by step, slowly, lovingly, gently, rehearsing with the student, revisiting, reminding, and I will come back to the re of learning a little later. So this is where we are. Link sound and meaning as quickly as possible. Too many times we're happy that the child is making a certain sound, but it's got to also be meaningful. And you work that out also with pictures and manipulatives and so on, and then work on automaticity through rehearsing, revisiting, reminding, and so on. Older students will need more of specific types of, they have more specific difficulties, and trying to find their learning style and work with their cognitive level, not to, as we say in the United States, I don't know where else, not to dumb it down, but to work at the level that the child is or the young student is and try to work that and bolster that. And as much as possible, try to gamify. Adults love games too, and that's something to really capitalize on. So entice your students that way. Next slide, please. So hopefully you're brainstorming as we're waiting for slides, okay? So opaque and transparent writing systems, not languages, but writing systems, okay? We have lots to do with working memory. And working memory, literacy has two subsystems in learning to read. We have the phonological loop and the visual spatial loop. And with dyslexic students, it's important that one or the other or both seem to sometimes be problematic, and the student will need extra time there and specific strategies. And so it's very critical to always try to connect the oral part that the students already know and build the phonemic awareness from there. We all know you start with what the children know and then move from there. Transparent language system is wonderful in that it has regularity and therefore predictability. And that will help your students with strategies for predicting things. And so, but with comparatively opaque language such as English, writing system has too many silent letters and irregularities. And one illustrative example here is quadragraphics, which are the word enough and through sound totally different, and therefore the complexity is clear there. But the magic is wonderful when a child realizes that something that they know how to say is represented in those particular letters. And what a wonderful moment that is. I hope all of you have seen that. Next slide, please. It's a moment of true excitement for many children. I remember them looking at each other going, ooh, ooh, and, anyway, it's magical. And so I hope all of you believe in magic. I believe that the slide can be advanced. Perhaps that's magic too. Next, please. Maybe you're familiar with Scarborough's reading rope. This is to illustrate how complex even a transparent language, transparent writing system, such as Bahasa Indonesian is. But again, you start with familiar words at the bottom, and you can say this sort of a bottom-up model, building upward, that all of these need to be interwoven and repeated in various ways and so on, so that the child and the student is building these knowledges as they go along. They are all very important for building that reading skill, but always build in meaning. Don't just be happy with, oh, the sounds, they're sounding it out and it sounds beautiful. Do they understand what they're saying? Okay, next slide, please. It's a
Dr.
lot
Mata,
to take in.
I apologize that you have 4 minutes left.
Okay,
So yeah, I
okay.
just want to let you know.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So what are learning strategies? They're the steps that the learner takes to facilitate encode, decode, make meaning, store and retrieve, and use the language. Research focuses on different classifications. I'm only interested in the affective and metacognitive for this presentation. Next slide, please. We're going to run through these fast, okay? For the teacher role, I really want to encourage all of you to become a co-learner. Learn with the student, model what the student needs, link it to a task, and then debrief after they've finished. What went well, what didn't go well, where do we still need to work? And then also for older students, let them know why it's important to look at these and develop these strategies. They will need the rationalization. Next slide. So struggling learners, often these students are unaware of what strategies they can use. I've even encountered this with college students. And then many use strategies, but they're not using it for the appropriate way for the particular task that they're completing. And it's very important to work with the student and ask them questions. Oh, I noticed that you did this. How did you do that? How did you figure that out? And get them to verbalize and think about that. These are metacognitive ways that they can debrief and understand what they're doing. And there are emotional demands as well, where strategies for managing anxiety, frustration, and so on also need to be built in, particularly for neurodivergent dyslexic students. Next slide, please. And so co-learning with your students, work along with them. And the thing that my students adore is when they get to share their strategies with each other. They think it's funny. They say, oh, me too, or oh, I didn't know that, and so on. And they become like the little engine who could. This is a little story, a classic one in American culture. So next slide, please. And all of you are familiar with the learning cycle, or the modeling cycle, but Step 2 is very important, where the teacher does it along with the student. Again, I'm asking you to step into their shoes, work together with them rather than teaching them, and putting in knowledge, asking them lots of questions as they go along. And then number 3, where students work with other students, and you're scaffolding them. And finally, they get to go solo. They love that. They can become independent learners. It really raises their confidence. Next slide. Next slide, please. But there is a bottleneck for many dyslexics where they get overloaded because the human brain can only process small amounts of information. Next slide, please. So we don't want them to be cognitively overloaded. So in working memory, this is their active workspace, and it helps you to understand why decoding takes longer for some students with a longer string of graphemes or remembering textural details, and it's because it exceeds their working memory's capacity. Next slide, please. So they're decoding and trying to become fluent. So this part is the re of learning. The more re's you use, the better the students will remember. And they always have to put that together with meaning in mind. And if you encourage students to try to teach each other, that is to retell what they learned, they will retain 90% of that. And that's a very important strategy to build into your teaching. Next slide. And finally, metacognitive strategies are the executive function. In cognitive terms, executive function strategies. In learning strategy language, it's metacognitive strategies. It's stepping back from your work. And by the way, this is what differentiates a good learner from a not so good learner. The good learners tend to do this naturally, but they can also be taught to do this. After a task, stop and self-assess. What went well? What did I do that made it difficult? What could I do? Is there a gap? What other strategies do I need? And if the student isn't doing it, you as the teacher should be asking them these questions. But the most important is that students get to decide for themselves what strategy helped them most, and that you can then suggest a few others if you want. But this is what puts the power into their hands. They become autonomous, self-directed, self-efficient learners. And so after each task, I call it the metacognitive moment. Don't forget to build that in. It doesn't take long, just a moment, and do it, because that holds students accountable for how they're learning, and it builds their confidence and their agency. So I would like to say terima kasih. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. Did I manage my time?
Right.
Yes.
Yes, that's your
Okay,
session is
great.
over. All right, thank you, Dr. Marta, for that insightful presentation. Your explanation were very clear, and the example you share really helped us understand the topic better. So I'm sure everyone gained a lot from your session.
Thank
All
you.
right, we already finished session with Dr. Marta, and now we move to the Q&A session. Please, Bapak Ibu, if you have any question, you can raise your hand on the using raise hand feature on the Zoom, or you can just post your question on the Zoom chat. Alright, silakan Bapak Ibu jika ada pertanyaan bisa angkat tangan ataupun diposting di chat box. Alright, I'm curious about your topic and about your material that you already present. Mostly our students spend more time at home instead of the school because learning hours. So how can parents be effectively involved in supporting language learning?
Hopefully, you can model to them certain types of things that they can do. It's important for parents to also see that, and also to develop the correct attitudes towards their child, not to see the child as being deficient, but rather seeing what are the tendencies and factors that are really helpful for the child. And you can ask them different types of questions. Does your child do these things? Do they like to do these things? What are they interested in? Oh, well, here's an idea for you to be working with them and then showing the parents how to interact, either with manipulatives or different kinds of things that can be shown through either body motions or other ways, color coding, things like tapping things, tapping out syllables, and a lot of the things that I saw also on the videos. So, those videos are probably very helpful for parents as well, and thinking along, how can you as a parent try to do that? Or let's try it at you, the teacher, with the parent, and now let's see if you can teach it to your child. And I don't know now with lots of cell phones and so on, perhaps the parent can video how they're working with their child at home, and you can review that and perhaps give them different strategies for working with their child.
All right, thank you for your sharing, Dr. Marta. Bapak Ibu, do you have any question for Dr. Marta? Silakan bisa angkat tangan. Silakan.
Miss Maya?
Oke,
She has to unmute.
oke. Mbak Berlianti mau bertanya?
Yes, maybe before the participant, good morning for Indonesia, Dr. Martha. I'm really interested in your research that before today activities, I read your PPT. So I want to ask a questions. So in the first slide, you emphasize that asset-based teachings and following students' home dialects as a bridge to school language. So in Indonesian context, as myself as a teacher, many students use regional language or dialects at home, such as Japanese. Like many of my students use Japanese at home, while formal instruction or the language that we use in school is in Bahasa Indonesia. So I want to ask, based on your research, what practical indicators can teachers like me use to decide when to leverage the home dialect and when to gradually shift towards academic language without causing a confusion for students with dyslexia? Thank you. I hope you understand my wish. Yes.
I think so. I think so.
Yes.
It's very important to elicit from the child different words, or you can just, first of all, of course, their name and different very common things that they say. Say if it is Japanese, you will hear it, and then you will write down the sound that they're making and point to it and help them do that association, making sounds and symbols associate that this is the way you say it in Japanese, and this is the sound that I hear in Bahasa Indonesia. So if that's the way that, it just gets represented differently than it does in Japanese. That's one possible way. I don't know if I'm missing anything else, but lots of, common objects, common things and I don't know if there are any cognates. Sometimes they're cognates with different languages. They sound very similar. They might mean different things. So that's why meaning is so important in all of this. But if you can bring the sound and the meaning together, that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Thank
All
you so
right, is
much,
that
Dr.
clear?
Mata.
All right, is that clear for you, Mbak Berlianti?
Yes, it's very clear for me. Thank you so much for your answer. It's very helpful for me. Thank you.
All right, we can move to the other question. We have question from Mbak Dea Pranidani. I wonder how can we help student who finds reading overwhelming, even though he can read already? We love to hear your response about this question, Dr. Marta.
Oh my goodness. Well, a lot depends on the age and what they're reading. And do they have background knowledge to base their understanding on. If you're reading about a subject that you don't know anything about, it's going to really hinder your comprehension and the meaningfulness of what you're reading. And therefore, finding out just how much they know already about what they're reading, and if they're interested, and building a certain interest in it if you can. Sometimes you can tell a personal story and tell them how you got interested, and maybe they can come along with it. There are many different ways. You just have to be very creative about some of these things and really get to know your students as much as possible. Ask the parents, ask other teachers, and ask, the child, of course, depending again on their age, what reading level they are. And that would, because I don't know, so it's a little hard to tune in on exactly what that might be. But sometimes it's very discouraging when you can't decipher, you can't decode, and can they skip that word or those words and continue and get meaning from the rest of the passage? Or if there's other ways, that perhaps it's illustrated. Some of my students tell me they go to YouTube and look at something, a video that explains the topic a little bit better, or something of that nature, or a song that's associated with whatever they're reading. There are many different ways. You just have to be really, really inventive and creative about it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Martha, for your answer. Is that clear for you, Mbak Dea Pranidhani?
And lots of patience. Patience, you just need so much more patience than you think that, okay, they said it good, I taught my lesson. That's not what it is. It's, does the student really comprehend? And can the student try to retell you what they've read, what they are trying to write, and so on, so that you're utilizing multiple modalities as they're learning.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Martha, for your explanation. And we have two other questions, but I will go with the question from Bu Resti Susanti. It will be your last question because time constraint. I'm so sorry for
That's okay.
Bu Zenafah Rina. So the last question is, you explained that Indonesian is a transparent writing system, while English is opaque and poses a steeper learning curve for students with dyslexia. For Indonesian students with dyslexia who are required to learn English, what strategic priority should teacher focus on first to prevent cognitive overload and loss of self-efficacy?
Wow. I will say that
Interesting
takes a
question.
whole course to explain. But there are doing things incrementally in small steps with lots of patience, lots of repetition, lots of getting the student to try to articulate as much as they can about what they're doing, how they're approaching it. And sometimes you will learn, as I say, you become a student of that student. You learn from them. They will teach you things that you never thought were possible, that, oh my goodness, that's the way you process that? I don't tell the students that, but sometimes I'll go, wow, that's so neat, that's so, just because it's so different. And so, but learning English when you're dyslexic is a very, very steep learning curve. And so lots of patience, lots of good repetition, modeling. Let's do it together. Let's try it together. I'm with you, because you're learning along with them. And I think putting yourself side by side rather than in front, face, so you become more their partner in crime, if you will. That's an expression in English. But you become their partner and you try to learn along with them, saying, ooh, here's the way I would try this. Can you try that? Does that help? And so on. So I think I've probably run out of my 10 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Martha, for the question. All right. We have other question, but unfortunately, our Q&A session is already over, so I apologize for those questions that could not be addressed. And Also, that concludes our time with Dr. Marta. It was very enlightening session, and we really appreciate your sharing your expertise. And I also notes two takeaways from today's session. First, asset-based teaching values a child whom dialect is a strength and helps them transition smoothly into the school language. And also, beginning and advanced reading require strategic and active learning and practice for learners. So before we officially close this session, I would like to invite Dr. Marta to deliver the closing statement. Dr. Marta, please share your short closing remarks with our audience.
Wow, my closing statement would be that oral language and phonetic or phonemic awareness needs to be linked very quickly to meaning and the graphemes, and then remember the lots of the re in order to make sure that students learn and do it gently, slowly, patiently, and always be willing to go back and repeat again and lead the child and have the child teach you and make students aware. And that's why I like the kana also that was mentioned at the beginning, that it brings out awareness and collaboration. You are in collaboration with the students. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Marta, for your insight, and thank you to everyone for your participation in the first session. Dr. Marta, wishing you a warm and restful evening, and have a good night. All right, Bapak Ibu, now we have our second speaker, Dr. Ian Kaplan. Is Dr. Ian already with us?
Yes, I am. Yes,
All right. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Dr.
you
Ian?
did. You did. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
It's not doctor, by the way. So, but
Oh, okay. Can I just go with Ian?
just Ian. Ian is
All
great.
right.
Thanks.
All right. Next, we are pleased to welcome Ian Kaplan, who will be sharing his expertise on literacy within a holistic approach to inclusion in education. Dr. Ian has 30 years of experience as a researcher, teacher, facilitator, university lecturer, international development worker, and education resource developer. His focus is on inclusion and diversity in education, and he has worked with communities, NGOs, multilaterals, and government ministries in Africa, the Balkans, Europe, the Middle East, Southeast, and Southeast Asia. Ian has been working with the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee, NEC, since 2013 as an education and research specialist, and is also a director of the Enabling Education Network, EENET, a global inclusion in education network of practitioners and researchers. He has worked to support government in Afghanistan, Armenia, and Zambia in anti-corruption efforts. All right, Dr. Ian, I would like to give you the time to begin your presentation.
Great. Thank you. Selamat pagi, everybody. Good morning. It's good to be here with you. I'm ready to go. Get the slides up. And just let me know if there's any problem with the slides. I could share them from my own. There we go. I'll make a start as it gets going anyway. Okay, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about a holistic approach to inclusion in education. Literacy kind of fits into that, and that's what that's where I'm going to focus now. Next slide, please. So, um, this is what I'm calling a sort of reintroduction to inclusion in education. Um, because I mean, I think all of us are aware of inclusion in education, and inclusive education is sometimes called. And I think many colleagues in the webinar today have been working in this area, maybe, perhaps for quite a few years as well. I want to look at it with this sort of systems thinking approach to consider how a holistic vision actually kind of works in practice, because holism sounds like it's a nice term and it sounds great, but it's quite abstract. And so I want to get down into the particulars a little bit, as well as framing the vision of this, with something called, that I'm calling the four dimensions of inclusion, diversity, and sustainability in education. I'll look sort of specifically at a literacy and numeracy ed tech application that we have been using in Afghanistan, something that I'm calling a framing as a sort of inclusive action and how that fits within these four dimensions. So we can sort of see how the holism can work in practice. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. The, One of the things for me in thinking about inclusion in education is that the way we represent this, conceptually, structurally, the way we think about it and the way we frame it is really important in terms of how people understand it, and how we see it and practice it as well. Um, the Often the way that I see inclusion presented to teachers, particularly, I'm thinking about it. I like to think about it from the level of it, and from the perspective of a teacher or a student or a parent in a community school. Often inclusion is presented as a checklist, as a kind of list of items that a teacher should be doing in a classroom or a school should be doing. But the challenge with checklists, and checklists have their place. I'm not sort of against the idea of a checklist per se, but and these were developed initially, or they came sort of to prominence in use in aviation. And when you're flying an airplane, checklist is probably a very important way to be able to keep track of all the things that you need to do to make sure that you can fly your plane safely, and land it. However, with thinking about practicing of education and how that works, checklists are not always the best way to do this. Next slide, please. And here's a version of a checklist. And just to say that I'm not critiquing the items on the list. These are all useful and good things that we would want to do, as inclusive educators. So there's, the list is, 15 items here. Things like understanding what inclusion is and is not, co-teaching, student-centered strengths-based assessments, differentiation of instruction, which is, of course, is a really big one for inclusive education practice. All of these things are very useful, in and of themselves. But the challenge is that I think of a teacher, when you get presented with a list like this, the what we miss, I mean, this can be very overwhelming, because teachers are already feeling often quite burdened and overwhelmed with their work. Particularly teachers that have a lot of administrative tasks, which is quite a few of them, which cut down on the actual time to prepare for teaching and learning and actual time for working with children and students in the classrooms. So getting another list that seemed, oh wow, now we have another 15 things that we have to do. And what's missing here is that the interconnection between these different things. How do they fit together? And actually, often the way that we could reframe these 15 items on the list are actually, many of these things are actually kind of connected, linked together in some way. You would be doing one or another and achieving several others potentially, but you have to kind of look at it in that way to be able to sometimes to be able to see how it fits together. Next slide, please. I always look for metaphors as ways to understand and explain what we're thinking about or what I'm trying to express in terms of a holistic vision. And I love this Indonesian expression. Uh, in English, for those who don't speak Bahasa, I mean, this is basically it means sort of passing multiple islands with the stroke of one oar. And it's another way of it, a much better way in my mind of saying killing two birds with one stone, which is the typical expression that we have from where I come from in the US, and in Europe. This is a really common expression, but it's very violent, this killing of the birds with the stones. I like this passing the islands with the stroke of one oar. So it's how we achieve multiple things together sort of at the same time. And that's really kind of at the heart of a holistic approach. Next slide, please. What I'm trying to do in terms of framing this is to look at what I'm calling here four dimensions of inclusion, diversity, and sustainability in education. The development of these dimensions, and look, there are many different ways to cut a cake or to parse these different areas of practice and theory, the praxis, the theory and practice of how you work and do actually live and practice inclusion. There are many ways to do that. This is maybe not the perfect way, but this is just, this is one sort of attempt of trying to do that. That we can see how this sort of works holistically. So we have these four areas. One is welcoming and conducive school environments. The other is positive collaborative relationships, quality inclusive teaching, learning, and assessment, and inclusive leadership and professional development. Next slide, please. The, to look at these dimensions and what they mean, the welcoming conducive school environment has to do with the aesthetics of the environment, but it's also the social and emotional environment as well. It's behavior, it's positive classroom and behavior management as well. um, it's a way of looking at what actually makes students feel welcome and what is conducive, and not just students. This is for teachers or parents or school administrators or anybody in a school community setting. And then what makes it possible to actually do quality inclusive teaching and learning, and assessment. What actually makes that happen? What is the atmosphere in the environment? So we think about that with that particular dimension. The positive and collaborative relationships is also really important. Of course, this is relationships between teachers and students, between students and other students, between school administrators, managers, and teachers and students, and critically also between parents and schools and communities and schools as well. So it's everything that's related to the relationships, and the relationships are like really obviously and perhaps sometimes underestimated in terms of the importance of actually the quality of the relationships within a school community setting in terms of actually the work that gets done there. Next slide, please. Then we have, quality inclusive teaching, learning, and assessment itself. This is, of course, the sort of business, I guess, of what, one of the main things that we're trying to do in a school. And this, this is everything related to that. And of course, picking up on things that Dr. Martha was saying, we're talking about things that are addressing students' emotional, social and emotional needs as well, that are engaging for learners, that are learner and learning centered. These types of things all sort of fit under that dimension. And then finally, and the fourth one here is inclusive leadership and professional development. And this doesn't just mean leadership from above. This means leadership from below as well. So that means promoting students as leaders, encouraging them, empowering them, giving them confidence and responsibility, and to have leadership roles in their schools. And it's also the professional development of teachers and others within a school setting as well. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about how a particular literacy intervention sort of fits within these four areas, these four dimensions. This is something called Rakana Saba, which is a literacy app that was developed specifically for Afghanistan. Actually, I believe it had picked up on some existing technology that was being used for teaching literacy elsewhere. And then it started as a literacy application, but then they added some numeracy components. So it was developed by diaspora Afghans who are living in Norway to support the need for improved and increased literacy in schools in Afghanistan. We used it. My organization is the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee. We're an NGO. We used this as part of a much larger project, which we called Inclusion in Action, which is a UNESCO supported project that we have been just sort of completed. The app was meant to address these extremely low sort of rates of literacy and numeracy in Afghanistan, and which I do have to say are worsening now as access to education, access to schools in Afghanistan for all students has been pretty dramatically reduced since the Taliban government has taken over in August 2021. So, but they were not wonderful before, and the learning outcomes when assessed for many years have showed sort of pretty poor rates of literacy in schools. And one of the but again, this stuff sounds okay. Well, what does that mean? Why are these rates so low? Why are students not learning literacy and often numeracy in schools? And the part of it is that students are often really bored, they're disaffected, they often leave school, they drop out or are pushed out, you could say. This is one of the reasons, and teachers also really struggle to be able to teach in engaging and inclusive ways. I think for teachers that often they're very limited in terms of the knowledge and experience that they have of different and multiple teaching methods. And they have very limited support as well to be able to do anything other than what they often have experienced themselves traditionally, which is the teacher directed teacher instruction, which is usually the primary mode of teaching in Afghan schools. So Rakana Saba was developed, and we found that the app was surprisingly for me, I would say, kind of successful. And uh, okay, so I have 5 minutes left, it looks like. Um, uh, so can we just jump ahead to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to go to sort of explain how this actually works. So with the quality inclusive teaching, learning, and assessment part, if we can go on to the next slide. Here's a picture of a girl in one of the schools who's using the app. So you can see Dr. Martha talked about gamifying, and this is a games-based approach, which was highly engaging for the learners. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this was a relatively short intervention, only only 2.5 months. We could see that students really sort of had some pretty dramatic improvements in their test results when we did a sort of a pre-test and a post-test, both in literacy and in numeracy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And next slide, yeah. But I want to think of it also from the perspective of the students and the teachers. One of the things that one of the students was actually saying with this is that, because when we talked to students after they were using this app, we wanted to understand how they had experienced it and why they found it actually engaging and enjoyable. And one of the students said, a girl from one of the girls' schools we did this with, she said, my mother had beaten me every day and I was sad. I didn't have an interest in learning. When I attended the app, the class for the app, I got busy with a new style of learning. I was using the tablet to learn through games, and it also made new friends. So I'm feeling happier now, and I want to continue the class if I can. So this kind of level of engagement, I mean, in some ways, it's not surprising, but given the sort of relatively the relative lack of engagement that many students often have in schools, but again, it was a little bit surprising for us as well. We can see that also this touched on the positive and collaborative relationships as well. So because it wasn't just about the teaching and learning aspect of the app, but it was also that as this girl was saying, that she made new friends. And one of the other things that we saw is that students began, and this also connects with something Dr. Martha was saying, students were teaching each other. So students who had not every student in the school was in the in the pilot using the application. We particularly focused on students who were really struggling the most with literacy and numeracy in the schools. So, but we found that these students, once they had learned through using the app, that they were teaching their friends and teaching other students. And so, this is also about the relationships within the school. Next slide, please. Um, no, back one, please. Can you go back two? Back a slide? Back, back. No, back the other way. Yeah, that's perfect. Um, one of the one of the teachers also discussed how she actually used this application. I just wanted to say that for me, it's really important that the apps and ed technology doesn't just do itself, right? It doesn't. I think that the role of teachers as facilitators and mediators of the experience of using education technology is really important and sometimes sort of under focused or underestimated on. So this particular teacher explained that I applied a variety of teaching strategies, including repetition and drills, interactive discussions, practical exercises, oral explanations, lesson reviews, and group activities. And then these diverse methods helped address different learning styles and kept students more engaged. And she said that combining technology-based lessons with traditional teaching techniques made the learning process more balanced and effective. This teacher, she was extremely reflective on how she used this in the process, which is really interesting for us as well. And it also shows the role of teachers facilitator in using applications and methods such as this. This is aspect of leadership and professional development for teachers as well. So we can sort of see now how using this app can touch on the at least three of the four areas of the four dimensions. Last slide, please, or next slide, please. It, Another teacher explained that, compared to the pre-program assessment, there were noticeable encouraging changes in students' performance and behavior. And previously, they appeared insecure and hesitant, often avoiding participation in class. Now they show greater confidence, speak more freely, and demonstrate a stronger willingness to learn. They've expanded their vocabulary and developed a sense of responsibility, particularly when entrusted with the tablets. Sense of ownership has positively influenced their attitudes towards caring for school property, maintaining discipline in the classroom. So this comes up back to touch on that fourth dimension, the welcoming and conducive school environments, particularly around students' behavior, um, and uh, and also students' feelings of, as I said, students' feelings of, as a teacher saying, students' feelings of confidence and responsibility as a part of this. So this was really interesting. We'd also, a lot of teachers who had used this noticed that students who had left school were coming back to school. Students that rarely showed up for class were interested in coming to class. So and then the teachers were actually able to link and apply that in other ways. So they could build on the sort of the students' re-engagement or their re-interest in school. Teachers were able to build on that and link that to other subjects and other things that they were doing. So they could use the app as the app was a sort of hook for the students, but then that helped bring students back into education and into schooling overall. Next slide, please. Right. And so yeah, basically I'll finish up in a second. This is what I think of as a sort of inclusive action using an application like this. It could be anything. The app is just one sort of example. Can be something that can be inclusion rich if we see how it fits within these four dimensions, and if we can actually articulate that and even better get students and teachers and others to kind of be able to articulate for themselves how they're actually able to kind of use something like this and cross, as we say, multiple islands with the stroke of one oar. One application can be very rich and connect out to many different areas of what we want for inclusion. And we can think of this also as a lever for change in a school community, and something that works towards a whole school or whole institution approach. Okay, next slide, please. Finally, I just wanted to say, for me, this also fits within, and this is systems dynamics and systems thinking about patterns and systems within, that are, within any institution and within society. And specifically to a school, we're looking to find ways to do something, if we can use an application like this Wakana Saba app, something that we can then build and link again that creates actually, a momentum of its own, of what we would call a virtuous circle. And this is something that can happen, particularly if teachers and others in school communities are oriented to think holistically, to see that when they use one thing, how can they link it and connect it to another? How can they build positive momentum off of something that happens, like when they're using the application? If they see that students are re-engaged in school, how can they build on that? That's how we kind of build the momentum and get a virtuous circle. I think I'll stop there because I know I'm over time. Thanks very much.
All right. Before we dive into the question, I want to say thank you to Ian for the wonderful presentation. And we already have some question in the Zoom chat. Maybe I will go first with the question from Bu Nur Hasanah. How to handle students who do not have a school contract? We love to hear your response, Ian.
Who did not
Is
have a
it
school contract,
school
sorry?
contract? Ya, Bu Nur Hasanah bisa diperjelas untuk school contract maksudnya seperti apa ya?
I'm not 100% sure that I understand the question, actually.
Right. Yes, I want to confirm to Bu Nur Hasanah first. Bu Nur Hasanah bisa unmute mikrofonnya mungkin? Apakah itu berkaitan dengan agreement antara murid dan sekolah, Bu Hasanah? Oke, saya lompati dulu ya Bu Nur Hasanah. Nanti bisa ditulis kembali pertanyaannya, terutama terkait dengan school contract yang dimaksud seperti apa. Oke, we can move to the other question. The next question from Bu Yanti Sam Amir. What is the role of the guidance and counseling for student disability in inclusive schools? What your thoughts about this question, Ian?
For guidance and counseling, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, hugely important. It, it the And I think if by that you're talking about the addressing students' social and emotional needs, I think that as I understand it, I mean, this has a huge role. And it's, this is one of the things I would say about this is not just true, of course, for students with sort of diagnosed disabilities. What we have in a lot of schools, particularly in Afghanistan, but I know that it's the same in working with schools in Indonesia, is that you have a lot of students who have unrecognized, unsort of, I hesitate to use the word diagnosed here because we don't want teachers to be diagnosticians, but unrecognized learning needs, emotional and social support needs. We saw this a lot after COVID, where students came back to school, often with who had experienced quite a lot of trauma during the time that they were out of school, with very little social sort of outlet and support during that time. So the social and emotional needs of students are always going to be there, and and those will vary. And certain students, of course, again, are going to have greater needs, and that may change over time as well. So that in this sense, then the guidance and support is extremely, extremely important. And we want that to be, we want a supportive environment so that if you are lucky enough in a school to actually be able to have an actual a counselor working in a school, that is fantastic. And the role of a counselor in this case is the same for me as I would say the role of a SENCO or a special educational needs coordinator or someone in that place. Their role is not to just work individually with students who need support. That may be a small part of it, but mainly their role is actually to support classroom teachers and support students, groups of students, a class of students to be able to work together, to be able to support each other, to teach them skills. And with social and emotional support, this can be a range of different things, but even as basic and simple as breathing exercises, something. So instead of just teaching that to an individual student who needs support, you would teach that to the whole class, right? And this is the role I see of one of the roles of a counselor or a special education needs coordinator who's providing psychosocial support.
All right, thank you for your answer, Ian. I hope it's clear for Bu Yanti. And next, we have a question from Bu Septin or Bapak Septin. Based on Ian's own experience in countries such as Africa and Afghanistan, what is the key to the successful implementation of inclusive education, and how can it be achieved?
Really good question. Really difficult for me to answer actually because uh, it's. I mean, I do think about this quite a bit, and especially now in Afghanistan, working in Afghanistan currently in a situation where because of the many restrictions that the government in Afghanistan now is putting on students, particularly on girls, I would say, because girls are largely banned from education beyond year 6 in Afghanistan now. This creates a very hopeless environment for many, which is totally understandable. The people's hopes and dreams and aspirations, particularly for women and girls, have been severely crushed and reduced over the last few years after 40 years before that of trauma and violence and war. And so when we're in a situation like this, I think one of the things that we also underestimate about people is their resilience in even in really hopeless situations. So for me, one of the keys of trying to do, successful sort of inclusion in these kind of settings is to really focus on the school and the community to understand that, if you work together with them, if you find a way to work together with them, you can actually um you can be able to recognize that even giving a little bit of support in this way, a little bit of positive encouragement, helping people. This is sort of what I would call solidarity, helping people to understand that you're with them and you're supporting them, whatever, whoever that it would be. If you're a government, school inspector, or you're working in an NGO like me, if you're coming from the outside, recognizing the school community, giving them some support, supporting them, giving them practical things. And this is what I talked about with the app, I think, but that's just one example. Practical things that they can use to touch on and connect with these different dimensions. Building, instead of just telling them that they need to make an inclusive environment, giving them actual tools and setting them up with practical activities that actually help build and structure inclusion by the way that they work, and giving support there. This is the way that I see to be able to do it in any setting where there's limited resources. And also just finally, just with that question, to recognize and support people to understand that they have a lot of resources already in their communities, right? They don't people waiting for support from outside, for external support. I don't think this is also a sustainability issue, which is why I say sustainability in there too. I think you want people to recognize that they have all kinds of resources that exist already within their schools and communities, and help them to kind of realize how they can actually make use of these existing resources, including parents and families who have a lot to share that could touch with the curriculum. For example, farmers who can teach about about the land and how that fits, and that can be linked with science, for example. Just a small thing. There are many different ways to do this. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I hope it goes some way.
All right, is that clear for you, Bu Septin or Pak Septin? Okay, I hope that makes sense for you, Bu Septin or Pak Septin. And then we will move to other question from Pak Agus Rindo. Pak Agus Rindo, how the inclusive leadership look likes and how to implement inclusive leadership.
Sure. Well, for me, I touched on it a little bit in my presentation, but the idea of inclusive leadership is not just leadership from above. I think this is really important to recognize that a shared sort of responsibility for leadership within a school community is really is the key for me. And how do we build that? How do we support that? You know, one thing is that, and I find this works for everybody. So even in school communities, and I'm thinking about a particular school in Afghanistan where I worked, which is a boys' school. And when we started to do some activities with the school, where they were actually where students were promoted as leaders, they were doing this inclusive school walk. They were walking around their school, mapping it, looking for spaces and places that were unused or underutilized, and thinking about ways that they could make improvements to the school facilities, like looking and the students were leading that. They were given they were given the task and then empowered to be able to lead that process. And they came up with great ideas. For example, they found all this rusted, broken metal lying in piles around parts of the school grounds, which is both dangerous but also unsightly. This is ugly to look at. And they had a library in the school, but there was nothing in the library. It was just an empty room. So they came up with the idea of taking this broken metal and turning it into bookshelves. So they worked together with parents and community to teach them how to kind of make bookshelves out of it, to clean it, to paint it. This small thing is a kind of a leadership, it's moving towards a version of student leadership because the students gain confidence. And even the head teacher of the school told me that, well, look, this is actually, I felt now with these activities, doing things like this, where teachers also were doing similar things and students where they're taking more active role and looking at the school and addressing needs and thinking about changes, then I feel like I'm not alone in doing this. Before I thought it was my entire responsibility just for me, and I felt very kind of isolated and alone. Now I feel like it's shared and that we have the teachers and students are also working together with me. So and then from the student side, once they get a little, I think teachers begin to notice that once students demonstrate, because of course students have huge capacity to be able to make decisions about everything in a school, not just spaces and places, but also about teaching and learning, and classroom management. And if students are given a little opportunity and support to actually express that, I think teachers gain confidence that students can actually do this. And that actually is a benefit to teachers and a benefit to the school when that happens. And then you can begin to see, again, this is that virtuous circle. You can begin to see how this stuff kind of builds and grows, if you sort of nurture it. It's like sort of like it's nurturing a garden in a sense. I see it kind of very organically like that. And so this can happen. And then that's the inclusive leadership. You're having it come from you still have leadership from above as well, but you have leadership from below at the same time, and you sort of are meeting together in the middle.
All right, thank you, Ian, for your answer. And I want to make sure that everyone have opportunity to ask, so I will move to Bu Khalih question. Do you think a game-based educational app similar to Rohana Sabah will be effective for Indonesian children if the content is tailored to their language and curriculum?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely. Again, and it's for me, it's a little bit strange to be talking about a literacy ed tech app. I am not somebody that really has embraced or loves education technology. I'm not a literacy expert either, as you probably know by the way I'm talking about things. Um, I so but I was again sort of pleasantly surprised by how effective this application was. And I think it's partly because it is a game. It is game based, and the students really did engage with that. They just and they have such limited opportunities to be able to do that. I think the situation in some Indonesian schools is actually much better than Afghanistan. I wouldn't say all schools in Indonesia, but I would say many. But however, nevertheless, I think something like this, if it's bought in and as part of as one method and approach, one tool within a much wider toolbox of inclusion practice in a school, then I think it can be very useful. And as you say, the question asker yeah, this has to be tailored and specifically tailored for the Indonesian and local language context as well. So that is important. It doesn't, the one thing, and I guess that the final thing with this question is just translating applications, like just taking an app and just changing the language isn't necessarily the greatest way to do this. I think the process, and this is not just true of ed tech, applications. This is also for teaching and learning materials or conceptual things. If we do taking them from one context, from one country, like from the US or something, and then just dropping it down into Indonesia with a translation is not enough. We need to actually adapt, and the process of adaptation is a long one, in my experience, to do this stuff. It takes a lot of time. This also happened with the development of the Rokana Saba app. They took the technology and the structure of it from somewhere else, but when it took them a long time, the developers, and to working together with us to pilot, and it took a long time to actually be able to adjust it and make it relevant for the Afghan context. So I would say don't underestimate the time and the effort that's involved in doing this, but if you can, it would be beneficial. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Last question from Bu Tatiana. Does inclusive education today truly center the humanity and individual needs of students, or does it still expect students to adapt to rigid educational systems?
Well, it should be the first part, the former part, the part of the question, not the latter part. I think, yeah, any if we're expecting students to fit within the rigid sort of constraints of an existing education system, that is not inclusion. That is absolutely the opposite of it. The idea is that the education system is flexible enough to be able to meet the needs of learners. And I would just say, in doing things like this, we really need to also, a systems thinking approach is super important. What's challenging is to just, look at, if we're just looking at the individual needs of of a few students, we easily lose the sense of the group, the larger group of students in a classroom or school. How do we address all of these things together? How do we include all learners together? And this is where we need to think about, things like the sort of supportive pyramid. There are different methods, or the twin track approach to inclusion. There are different methods for looking at a system like this, where we can actually address learners' needs, but we recognize that a lot of the things that a teacher does in a classroom are going to meet the needs of all students, right? And these are simple, basic things. For example, just by being warm and greeting students in the morning and asking how they are, that's a great thing for all students, regardless of their needs, their strengths, their diversity. That setting and building the atmosphere, the base of the pyramid like that, allows teachers to build a warm, supportive environment, and then they can hopefully have more time and more capacity to kind of reach out and extend to provide additional support needs for those students that actually need it. The smaller percentage of students within a classroom that actually are going to need more individualized support, for example.
All right, thank you. One more. There is a follow-up question from Bu Yanti. Will you be willing if I contact you further to discuss this about the role of guidance and counseling? And she wanna ask your email to discuss about this, because she's currently studying for doctoral degree in guidance and counseling in Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. If so, I will suggest her to reach out the Rainbow team member to connect with you.
Absolutely. Maybe just one last point with this. I would just say that with the guidance, with the psychosocial support, the guidance and the counseling part of this, one of the things, again, this is kind of an experience from Afghanistan recently, is that we've been focusing a lot more on bringing psychosocial support activities into the classrooms, into the schools, and to work with parents as well. One of the things we kind of recognized is that, we were teaching teachers to be able to do psychosocial support with students, but we had not actually recognized that teachers have their own unmet psychosocial support needs, particularly in the Afghan context, because of the extreme long period of violence, conflict, and war, and repressive and restrictive social and cultural conditions that were really making teachers, extremely traumatized. You're talking about a whole country that's in fact suffering in a way from post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I think looking for ways with the guidance and counseling that also teachers can address and recognize their own psychosocial support needs is really important part of this process as well.
All right, thank you, Ian, for your response. Bapak Ibu, it's time to wrap up our session with Ian. We appreciate your valuable insight and expertise shared today. I also note some key takeaways from today's session. Instead, telling people to implement inclusive education is better to provide actual tool and setting to practical activity to achieve for inclusive education implementation. And the second one, collaboration between teacher and also student in planning and implementing a positive change to the school environment will lead to welcoming school environment and improve relationship between the teacher and also the student itself. So to conclude, I would like to invite Ian to deliver the closing statement. Ian, please share your short closing remarks with our audience.
Thank you. And I like your reflections. I think you actually did a better way of explaining some of these points than I did in my presentation and your summary there. I want to touch on that last point that you made. I think that this is a shared work for students, teachers, families, communities. This is something, it is not something that, practicing inclusion and diversity and sustainability in education is not just the business of a teacher or a principal or a head teacher in a school, or even less so like somebody from from the Ministry of Education at the national or the, district or state level or municipality level. It's not, it's everybody's responsibility. But really, we have to focus again on the school community to see how that actually works in practice. And if we can sort of get these things going and the recognition that it is a shared responsibility, building the kind of activities, this is also why I did talk about the practical kind of use of things, building, practical structures, practical activities that help structure inclusion. Things that kind of naturally flatten the hierarchies that might exist within a school already, so that teachers recognize that students actually have leadership, have great leadership potential themselves, something that brings so that and this also I think touches on what Dr. Martha was saying, which is really important, is that like teachers are learning as well. Teachers are learning along with students, and I think it's really important for students and teachers to both recognize that as being a real, valid, and important thing that as teachers and students do really good practical inclusion actions and activities within school, they're both learning, and it's new for teachers as well. They're learning. They're not just learning what the students are learning. They're learning they're also learning for themselves as well. This is a part of their professional development, and this is what happens, I think, when we see that shift from teacher as sort of didactic, master of the classroom to teacher as facilitator. I think this is one of the things that naturally happens. The teacher's role as a learner becomes more prominent, and the co-learning together of students and teachers and others in the school community is super important there. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you again for your insightful presentation, Ian. And I believe everyone here can a lot of insight from your session. And once again, thank you and have a good weekend.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
All right, Bapak Ibu, next we will welcome our third speaker, Profesor Dr. Endang Rohyadi, MPD. Prof. Endang, apakah sudah hadir di Zoom?
Sudah. Oke.
Baik. Oke, saya bacakan dulu untuk profil Prof. Endang. Profesor Dr. Endang Rohyadi is a professor in the Special Education Program at Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia Bandung. His research focuses on accessibility for students with physical impairments in the higher education, the impact of language skills on mathematics comprehension, adaptive behavior instrument, and post-school transition skills. He has also published several textbooks, including the mediated learning model in early reading for children with intellectual disabilities. His research article include a paper in the Journal of Applied Linguistics titled Phonological Based Reading Instruction to Improve Dyslexic Student Early Reading Ability. Prof. Ndang, apakah sudah siap untuk menyampaikan materinya?
Insya Allah.
Yes.
Iya.
Baik, now I would like to give the time to Professor Dr. Endang Rohyadi, MPD, to begin the presentation. Prof. Ndang, time is yours.
Ya. Bisa langsung saja itu.
Yes, monggo, Prof.
Mbak Siti, share-nya udah bisa dibuka ya?
Teman-teman boleh dibantu untuk share screen slide Prof. Ndang.
Oh, ininya dari saya aja.
Share screen-nya akan dari Prof. Ndang atau dari
Iya,
kami?
dari saya aja.
Oke, baik teman-teman bisa di close share screen-nya. Prof. Ndang akan share screen sendiri. Oke, terima kasih.
Oke, bisa dimulai?
Monggo, Prof.
Oke. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Ah, terima kasih ya pada panitia yang sudah mengundang. Kebetulan ini dengan Mr. Ian Kaplan nih. Dan selamat juga ya kepada Dr. Marta ya. Terima kasih. Saya akan mencoba untuk sedikit memberikan informasi terkait dengan bagaimana sih kita sebetulnya untuk memberikan proses pembelajaran membaca permulaan. Sekalipun mungkin ini lebih khusus pada anak-anak yang mengalami hambatan intelektual. Nah, tetapi sebetulnya ini bisa berlaku untuk semua, terutama untuk anak-anak secara umum. Oke. Nah, saya mengambil judul dari satu kalimat ke beragam makna, gitu kan. Karena ini menjadi salah satu bagian inti dari dampak reposisi bunyi suku kata pada dalam membaca permulaan bagi anak yang mengalami hambatan intelektual. Oke, Ah, ada dua faktor sebetulnya yang membuat terjadinya banyak kegagalan dalam proses belajar membaca. Faktor pertama itu terkait dengan penguasaan prasyarat. Nah, ada dua aspek dan tadi saya pikir sudah mulai disinggung oleh Dr. Marta ya, yaitu berkaitan dengan fonologi dan berkaitan dengan persepsi visual. Dan dua hal ini yang menjadi prasyarat sesungguhnya untuk membaca ini. Ketika ini terjadi kegagalan, maka dampak peluang untuk gagal dalam membaca juga terjadi. Yang kedua, berkaitan dengan cara penerapan metode untuk membaca itu sendiri. Di sini juga banyak kekeliruan yang dilakukan ketika memilih dan menerapkan cara bagaimana membelajarkan melalui metode yang digunakan itu. Nah, jadi ada dua aspek penting sebetulnya berkaitan dengan proses belajar membaca ini. Nah, yang pertama perlu kita lakukan itu adalah latihan tentang kematangan membaca, yaitu terkait dengan kesadaran linguistik atau fonologis atau tentang bunyi dan berkaitan dengan persepsi visual. Baru kemudian kita akan menerapkan metode membaca itu sendiri. Nah, dalam penerapan metode membaca ini, saya menggunakan pendekatan reposisi bunyi suku kata itu dalam membaca permulaan itu. Nah, khususnya yang kami terapkan itu dalam bagi anak yang mengalami hambatan intelektual. Nah, dua hambatan ini pada dasarnya itu harus menjadi satu kesatuan yang utuh, menjadi bagian yang harus diselesaikan. Jadi dalam proses belajar membaca, itu pertama melakukan latihan kesadaran linguistik dan persepsi visual. Dan ketika ini selesai, baru proses belajar permulaan itu dilakukan. Kira-kira seperti itulah garis besarnya. Dan keseluruhan proses ini yang sesungguhnya yang seharusnya dilakukan dalam membaca permulaan pada anak dengan hambatan intelektual. Tetapi saya meyakini pada anak-anak yang secara umum, kalau dua aspek ini tidak diperhatikan, itu akan timbul kegagalan. Bahkan saya berani menyatakan, nampaknya kegagalan di sekolah reguler juga termasuk salah satu hal yang dapat menimbulkan terjadinya terhambat dalam membaca. Bahkan mungkin ini menjadi sebuah kegagalan cara mengajarkan di Indonesia. Mudah-mudahan tidak percaya gitu kan, supaya semua bisa segera melakukan penelitian. Baik. Nah, tentu saja banyak gitu ya aspek pada kesadaran linguistik itu. Ada fonem, morfem, semantik, sintaksis. Persepsi visual juga banyak. Ada diskriminasi, spasial, figure and ground, dan memori. Nah, ini semua yang mesti dilatihkan pada anak itu. Nah, apakah hanya masalah prasyarat yang menimbulkan kegagalan membaca? Oh, tentu tidak, kan? Tetapi ini menjadi salah satu prerequisite. Yang kedua, itu terkait dengan metode. Nah, metode yang masuk ke Indonesia itu cukup banyak. Semua metode itu ke Indonesia itu masuk, kan? Dan semua dilakukan oleh para guru di lapangan. Tetapi ada beberapa yang menimbulkan terjadinya kesalahan dalam cara menerapkan metode itu. Mudah-mudahan banyak yang protes gitu ya, supaya kita bisa diskusi nantinya. Nah, saya menyarankan untuk tidak menggunakan sebuah metode huruf dan abjad di awal, apalagi prasyaratnya belum terpenuhi. Kenapa metode huruf dan metode abjad itu menjadi tidak cocok? Karena apa yang dibunyikan itu menjadi sangat berbeda dengan apa yang disimbolkan. Kenapa? Karena struktur bahasa Indonesia itu bukan huruf. Bunyi terkecil dari struktur bahasa Indonesia sesungguhnya itu adalah suku kata. Nah, ini yang seringkali terjadi timbulnya masalah. Karena tidak mempertimbangkan tentang struktur bahasa Indonesia. Dan ini kebanyakan memang di Indonesia itu banyak yang menerapkan metodenya itu yang bersifat sintetis, yaitu metode huruf dan metode abjad. Nah, tentu saja ini panjang ceritanya. Nah, oleh karena itu, gitu kan, dilema dalam menerapkan metode fonik, khususnya untuk huruf dan abjad, dalam membaca di Indonesia, itu menjadi sesuatu yang seringkali menimbulkan banyak masalah pada anak. Nah, pendekatan fonik itu ada syllabic method, alphabet method, dan pendekatan melalui metode fonik gitu kan, murni, yaitu mengajarkan dengan, kalau di Indonesia dikenal dengan metode huruf dan metode abjad. Nah, secara garis besar itu, tentu saja ini ada argumentasi landasan filosofis di belakangnya, tapi saya tidak akan menjelaskan itu. Nah, ada juga yang menjadi gabungan dari itu, yaitu uh, dikenal di Indonesia itu dengan metode SAS. Ini salah tulis ya. Seharusnya SAS, struktur analisis sintetis itu ya. Nah, ini sebetulnya dua metode yang menggabungkan sintetis dan analitis. Nah, semua metode ini masuk ke Indonesia. Tapi metode yang paling banyak itu digunakan adalah pendekatan fonik, tetapi salah menerjemahkan tentang metode fonik ini, yaitu kesalahan konsepnya. Yang paling mendasar dalam pembelajaran membaca di Indonesia itu yang terjadi ketika fonem itu direduksi atau disamakan dengan huruf. Padahal fonem itu adalah bunyi, gitu kan, dari simbol yang akan dibaca. Nah, akibatnya seringkali di lapangan itu anak akhirnya harus menghafal huruf dari A sampai Z. Dan penyebutan huruf kadang-kadang menjadi tidak sesuai antara simbol dengan bunyi. Inilah yang membuat terjadi kebingungan pada anak. Oke, mudah-mudahan teman-teman tidak setuju ya. Nah, bunyi huruf, kan, nah dampak langsungnya itu, ini sebagai ilustrasi. Ketika kita menyebutkan kata B, itu kan ada bunyi E di situ. Dan ketika B itu diajarkan, kemudian ditambah dengan A, maka yang terbaca itu menjadi BA. Tetapi ketika anak membunyikan BA, itu anak disalahkan. Padahal yang terdengar oleh anak itu memang seperti itu. Sehingga anak menjadi bingung kenapa B ketika digabungkan dengan A itu menjadi ba. Nah, ini kebingungan awal itu kan tentang metode abjad ketika kita menerapkan itu. Nah, kesalahan yang kedua itu seolah-olah anak itu baru bisa membaca kalau dia hafal dari A sampai Z. Nah, ketika ini terjadi pada anak tunagrahita, tentu saja ini akan menjadi persoalan besar. Menghafal 26 huruf dan setiap huruf tidak punya makna, tidak ada huruf yang menarik gitu kan. Karena huruf adalah sebuah gambar. Nah, anak-anak ini sulit untuk bisa menghubungkan antara bunyi dengan huruf. Karena dalam proses membaca sesungguhnya adalah membunyikan huruf gitu kan sesuai dengan simbolnya. Nah, prinsip-prinsip ini seringkali terabaikan. Nah, sehingga anak akhirnya menjadi lambat gitu kan. Nah, ini juga akan menjadi sebuah kesulitan untuk menemukan kata-kata baru nantinya. Anak juga akan bergantung pada hafalan secara visual, yaitu menghafal simbol-simbol. Nah, sementara membaca itu kan sebetulnya menghubungkan bunyi dengan simbol. Begitu juga dalam matematik sebetulnya. Dalam matematik itu kan menghubungkan fakta dengan simbol, tetapi diawali dengan bunyi. Nah, apa yang mendengar tidak selalu kan sejalan dengan apa yang tertulis. Nah, disinilah awal dari kesulitan bagi anak. Bukan hanya pada anak tunagrahita atau hambatan intelektual, tapi pada semua anak. Nah, kesimpulannya metode huruf menjadi tidak cocok untuk di Indonesia karena tidak sejalan dengan struktur bahasa Indonesia. Struktur bahasa Indonesia, bunyi terkecilnya itu adalah suku kata. Nah, suku kata itu apa yang dibunyikan itu akan sama dengan apa yang ditulis atau apa yang dilihat secara visual. Oke. Nah, mengapa kesalahan ini sangat mengakar di Indonesia? Kan? Nah, pertama ini menjadi tradisi metode abjad ini, dan ini sudah membudaya. Nah, guru tidak lagi mengenal tentang fonologi terapan, tentang kesadaran tentang bunyi itu. Nah, istilah fonik, nah ini yang berbahaya itu disalahpahami sebagai menghafal huruf. Jadi sehingga anak itu diminta menghafal huruf dari A sampai Z. Baru menggabungkannya menjadi suku kata. Nah, inilah yang awal kesulitan anak ini. Nah, tidak pernah juga mengenal prasyarat itu. Dan anak itu kan diminta langsung dalam proses belajar membaca. Sementara kesiapan untuk belajar membaca yang berkaitan dengan kesadaran fonologi dan persepsi visual itu belum dimiliki dengan baik. Nah, oleh karena itu, solusinya adalah mengubah cara, yaitu dengan cara sentence method atau reposisi bunyi suku kata. Jadi mengajarkan proses belajar membaca itu dengan metode yang berbasis pada reposisi suku kata. Nah, metode reposisi suku kata ini sebetulnya yang kami lakukan itu mengcombine sistem sintaksis dan analitis. Jadi kalimat dulu yang diajarkan, baru diurai menjadi kata, kemudian diurai menjadi suku kata. Tetapi saya tidak melangsungkan pada mengurai suku kata menjadi huruf. Kenapa? Karena seringkali terjadi akhirnya yang diajarkan itu adalah yang di akhir, yaitu hurufnya itu. Padahal proses itu sesungguhnya untuk melatih tentang kesadaran bunyi. Nah, ketika itu selesai di uraian menjadi suku kata, barulah dilakukan reposisi bunyi. Nah, melalui reposisi bunyi itulah akhirnya anak akan mudah membaca, bisa menemukan kata-kata baru yang bermakna, bahkan bisa menjadikan sebuah kalimat yang ditemukan sendiri oleh anak. Nah, pada anak dengan hambatan intelektual, kegagalan membaca itu bukan soal kecerdasan, tetapi sesungguhnya kegagalan utamanya itu karena kesiapan membaca itu, yaitu berkaitan dengan masalah fonologi terutama. Hubungan masalah fonologi terhadap membaca, hubungan juga persepsi terhadap membaca, korelasinya itu sangat tinggi. Tetapi yang paling tinggi itu tentang masalah fonologi. Dua-duanya memang punya korelasi tinggi. Tapi yang paling tinggi itu adalah masalah fonologi, kesadaran akan bunyi. Oke, baik. Nah, caranya ada dua tahap. Jadi sajikan dulu kalimat pendek, lalu pecah menjadi kata. Ini sebetulnya sudah banyak dilakukan oleh teman-teman di lapangan. Nah, pecahlah kemudian menjadi suku kata. Nah, hanya yang saya lakukan, mudah-mudahan tidak setuju ya. Yang saya lakukan itu hanya sampai di sini. Pada langkah yang kedua itu, jadi tidak dilangsungkan pada huruf, tapi hanya pada suku kata. Baru pada suku kata itu dilakukanlah reposisi suku kata itu. Sehingga akan ditemukan kata baru. Setelah kata baru itu ditemukan, lakukan juga tuh reposisi katanya. Sehingga bisa menemukan kalimat-kalimat baru. Nah, barangkali sebagai ilustrasi bisa, sebagai contoh, ya, memberikan satu kalimat, Rudi baru beli buku. Nah, ini pecah menjadi kata, itu kan. Ada kata Rudi, baru beli dan buku itu. Tetapi kesalahannya cara membacanya. Sebetulnya cara membacanya itu ini dipisahkan ini untuk membuat jeda sebetulnya. Jadi kalau kalimat pertama itu Rudi baru beli buku. Maka cara yang kedua membacanya itu dipecah itu adalah Rudi baru beli buku sehingga menjadi lebih pelan. Pada kondisi suku kata jauh lebih itu lebih panjang lagi menjadi Rudi dan ini hendaknya dilakukan dengan petunjuk dengan memulai dengan jari dengan apa sehingga anak itu akan mengikuti bunyi itu sesuai dengan jari yang ditujukan. Nah, dari sinilah baru langkah kedua itu melakukan reposisi bunyi. Ini hanya ilustrasi ya. Dari Rudi itu kan akan ada 7 suku kata. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ya. Nah, ini dibolak-balik reposisi sambil anak membaca sendiri dan dituntun. Dan dari reposisi ini akan ditemukan kata-kata baru. Dari 4 kata awal yaitu Rudi, baru, beli, dan buku itu ditemukan ada 14 kata baru. Sehingga sekalipun ini akan lebih banyak lagi, hanya yang lainnya itu kurang bermakna. Tetapi ini juga belum tentu semua kata yang ditemukan itu bermakna. Kata ruru misalkan, mungkin itu hanya dikenal dalam bahasa Sunda itu ya. Nah, kata yang lain juga banyak yang belum bisa dikenal oleh anak gitu. Mungkin kata babu juga belum banyak dikenal pada anak tunagrahita. Kata kuli juga belum mungkin. Ya. Nah, dari sini dilakukanlah reposisi bunyi, yaitu reposisi berdasarkan katanya, sehingga dapat memunculkan kalimat-kalimat baru. Mungkin kalimat-kalimat ini juga kurang bagus dalam struktur bahasa Indonesia. Tapi yang paling penting adalah anak ini akhirnya bisa membaca itu kan dan bisa menemukan dari suku kata yang dilakukan melalui reposisi bunyi itu memunculkan kata-kata yang baru itu. Kata-kata yang tidak bermakna kemudian dibaca itu hampir 80% anak itu menanyakan pada kita, ini apa? Nah, ketika kita jelaskan bahwa itu tidak punya pengertian, langsung dia mencoretnya. Nah, jadi secara tidak langsung gitu kan, kita mencoba untuk membawa anak ini.
Maaf, Prof, masih di mute mikrofonnya. Ya, sepertinya kepencet. Mikrofonnya, Prof, suaranya jadi tidak terdengar di kami. Ya, sudah
Masih?
sekarang. Sekarang sudah bisa terdengar.
Baik. Nah, kira-kira itulah yang ingin saya sampaikan. Nah, mungkin yang menjadi pertanyaan itu, apakah mengajarkan satu kalimat dengan 9 pertemuan secara rutin, apakah itu tidak terlalu lama gitu kan? Nampaknya memang seperti lama gitu kan. Tapi persoalannya kalau kita bandingkan gitu, anak-anak yang saya lakukan penelitian itu mereka sudah belajar selama 6 tahun bahkan sudah di SMP. Paling tinggi itu hanya bisa membaca suku kata. Dan yang paling tinggi lagi adalah membaca kata itu pun melalui proses mengeja dan bantuan. Jadi kalau dibandingkan Karena ada yang bertanya, apakah mengajarkan satu kalimat pada anak, gitu kan, proses belajar membaca, sampai 9 kali pertemuan secara rutin. Dan itu kan pelaksananya kadang-kadang menjadi sampai 3 minggu. Tetapi kalau kita bandingkan dengan uh, sebelumnya, itu tetap jauh lebih efektif. Dan yang paling mengagumkan adalah anak-anak ini akhirnya dia menemukan sendiri itu. Setelah posisi bunyi dilakukan itu. Kata-kata yang tidak bermakna disingkirkan sendiri. Nah, ini bisa Anda coba, gitu kan. Dan saya berharap memang Anda tidak percaya, gitu kan. Nah, agar segera dilakukan riset bersama, gitu kan, untuk membuktikan. Kesimpulan akhir dari keseluruhan proses riset yang saya lakukan, saya punya kesimpulan bahwa ada kegagalan membaca di Indonesia itu karena 2 aspek tadi, yaitu terkait dengan prasyarat untuk kematangan membaca itu belum tuntas, belum bisa selesai, tetapi langsung pada membaca. Dan kedua adalah kesalahan dalam cara menerapkan metode itu yang tidak dipertimbangkan dengan struktur bahasa Indonesia. Itu barangkali ya,
Oke,
Mbak
baik,
Siti,
terima kasih.
yang
Ya,
ingin saya sampaikan.
oke.
Dan monggo
Baik,
kalau
terima
ada
kasih.
yang mau bertanya, tapi jangan sulit-sulit ya.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih Prof. Endang Rohyadi atas pemaparannya. Presentasinya sangat jelas, banyak yang em, kayaknya peserta refleksikan dan juga nanti akan terapkan di pekerjaan sebagai guru nanti di sekolah. Baik, Prof. Endang, selanjutnya kita akan masuk ke sesi tanya jawab. Kita sudah ada satu pertanyaan yang sudah satu peserta yang angkat tangan. Silakan Bu Zana untuk di-unmute dan disampaikan pertanyaannya.
Baik, terima kasih Miss Maya. Selamat pagi, Prof.
Iya.
Ya, Prof, iya, saya ini kan juga guru di inklusi.
Oke, Bu Zana, suaranya jadi hilang.
Jelas,
Bisa
jelas,
di...
jelas, agak jelas.
Sudah.
Monggo.
Baik, begini Prof. Jadi di sekolah itu kan memang ada sekolah inklusi dan juga sekolah reguler ya. Nah, kebanyakan itu biasanya problem ketika tentang bahasa itu munculnya malah yang lebih sulit itu yang dari klasikal kan atau reguler gini. Jadi karena memang belum ada diagnosa di awalnya ya Prof ya. Nah, dan juga ini tadi saya juga sudah lihat bagaimana kesiapan anaknya itu perlu kita lihat dulu. Nah, sedangkan anaknya biasanya diketahuinya mungkin di kelas yang sudah mulai agak naik ketika kelas 2 atau kelas 3 SD. Nah, sebenarnya sebelum kita meminta orang tua untuk diagnosa atau apa ya ikut tes itu kan sebenarnya kita juga perlu mempersiapkan diri ya dengan evidence-evidence itu. Nah, kalau untuk anak yang di reguler ini untuk kesiapan membaca itu tadi kita bisa prediksi anaknya mungkin itu termasuk di slow learn atau mungkin memang ada kendala disleksia atau apa itu biasanya pada tahap yang mana ya Prof ya? Kan tadi ada mungkin apakah dari uh, fonemnya dia belum paham atau seperti apa itu.
Identified if the children have the problem.
Oke,
Maaf.
teman-teman dari Rainbow Team boleh dikondisikan atau diatur kembali biar untuk yang interpreternya tidak suaranya tidak masuk di main room. Minta tolong dibantu. Oke, Bu Sana bisa kembali
Ya,
melanjutkan.
jadi
Terima kasih.
mungkin bisa Prof, dibantu sama Prof untuk bagaimana ya tahap awal kita itu bisa tahu concernnya atau anak ini sebenarnya permasalahannya di mana? Apakah memang di pemahamannya atau memang dia ada murni karena memang kurang stimulasi atau memang biasanya itu ada double misalkan dia juga ada slow learn-nya, ternyata juga ada disleksianya seperti itu, Prof.
Oke.
Jadi mungkin cara asesmennya yang bisa membantu guru gitu.
Oke. Ah, dalam melakukan asesmen, yang pertama itu tetap harus melakukan mengecek tentang kesadaran linguistiknya, akan kesadaran bunyinya. Karena dua aspek ini, kesadaran fonologi dan kesadaran persepsi visual, itu hampir terjadi pada semua anak yang gagal dalam membaca ya. Justru kegagalan atau kita menganggap atau kita menemukan anak ini punya masalah membaca sehingga di kelas 2 bahkan di kelas 3 bahkan sekarang itu di sekolah reguler itu kelas 4 itu juga banyak yang belum bisa membaca. Belum bisa membaca dengan baik itu justru informasi awal. Yang kalau mereka bicara itu barangkali justru informasi awal ini untuk isyarat ya. Segera lakukan tentang dua aspek tadi. Apakah kegagalan ini ada pada fonemnya, kesadaran akan bunyi huruf, kesadaran akan morfem, kesadaran akan makna, atau kesadaran akan kalimat-kalimat itu, sintaksisnya. Gitu kan. Nah ini memang harus dicari. Nah ini tentu saja harus disusun instrumen ini. Begitu juga dalam persepsi visual. Nah, mungkin dalam persepsi visual itu dalam kebanyakan sudah cukup bagus gitu kan. Nah, dalam persepsi visual itu kan juga ada diskriminasi, ada 4 aspek itu. Dan itu memang harus dicek semuanya. Nah, beberapa subjek yang saya temukan itu dari 39 anak. Ternyata dua aspek itu memang dua-duanya buruk. Tetapi yang paling buruk itu ada pada polemik. Nah, begitu juga mungkin agak sedikit berbeda ya dengan anak yang terjadi pada anak autis. Nah, ini yang belum saya koreksi secara mendalam. Karena pada anak autis ini ada neurologi diversity itu, yaitu cara di otaknya itu memang sangat berbeda cara kerjanya. Ini bukan penyakit, tapi memang cara kerja otak mereka seperti itu. Nah, apakah ini juga memiliki hal yang sama gitu kan? Ketiga, menghubungkan antara bunyi dengan simbol itu. Apakah ada kekacauan atau ada satu sistem yang cara berbeda untuk bisa menghubungkan? Ini perlu riset panjang kalau ini, gitu kan. Tetapi pada dasarnya, lepas dari persoalan apakah anak ini akan sudah duduk di kelas 2, di kelas 3, di kelas berapapun. Jadi memang harus setback ke belakang untuk mengecek tentang prasyarat itu. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua juga harus dilihat tuh. Sebetulnya kita ini sudah benar tidak menerapkan metode itu. Sebab ternyata kesalahan terbesar itu kan, itu salah dalam cara menerapkan dalam metodenya itu. Mulai dari penerapan metode itu yang sifatnya kalimat, kata. Kalau dari kata akan turun, ujungnya akan ke huruf. Dilakukan struktur-strukturnya itu dipisah-pisah. Nah, kebanyakan yang menjadi kesalahan itu ketika misalkan kata itu dipecah menjadi suku kata, maka cara membacanya itu menjadi satu-satu suku kata. Apalagi setelah suku kata itu dipecah menjadi huruf. Yang diajarkan itu bukan bunyi kata, tetapi huruf-hurufnya itu. Nah, ini hampir 99% ternyata guru juga belum memahami betul bagaimana cara mengkonstruksi dari metode itu kan cara mengucapkannya itu seperti apa? Ternyata banyak kesalahan. Yang banyak dilakukan itu kalau menggunakan metode SAS misalkan. Dibacakan kalimat, kemudian diturunkan menjadi kata, tetapi ketika proses membacanya itu membaca kata demi kata. Padahal bukan membaca kata demi kata. Yang dibaca itu adalah tetap kalimat. Hanya intonasinya menjadi sangat lambat. Ketika ini dipecah menjadi suku kata, sebetulnya juga membaca kalimat, tapi dengan intonasi yang berbeda sesuai dengan bunyi suku kata. Sehingga membacanya itu akan panjang. Apalagi pada huruf. Nah, ini salah satu kesalahan terbesar karena tidak tahu juga bagaimana sebetulnya proses cara membacanya ketika itu entah dari kalimat atau entah dari uh, kata. Begitu juga sebaliknya, ketika memang yang diajarkan itu melalui huruf di awal yang menuju pada kalimat. Nah, persoalan yang dari huruf itu belum apa-apa, anak sudah dihadapkan pada kekacauan-kekacauan karena anak melihat antara bunyi yang diucapkan, yang diajarkan, itu dipandang tidak sesuai karena anak belum bisa menjangkau proses itu. Tadi, misalkan ketika guru mengatakan ini B, itu akan terdengar bunyi B. Bunyi yang lain juga, terutama ketika mengajarkan konsonan. Hanya satu, mengajarkan vokal yang sesuai antara bunyi dengan visualnya itu, dengan simbolnya itu. Tapi dalam mengajarkan konsonan, antara bunyi dengan simbol itu berbeda yang diucapkan itu. Nah, ini sebagai awal kebingungan. Tapi kalau ini sudah dikuasai dengan baik, maka itu kan kepasihan dalam mengucapkan suku kata itu akan jauh lebih baik. Prosesnya tapi akan lama. Kegagalan yang terjadi itu kebanyakan tidak diubah caranya. Kayak mudah-mudahan saya diundang untuk menjelaskan ini lebih panjang karena ini mungkin harus 1 semester gitu kan untuk memberikan penjelasan ini itu dan bisa membuktikan dan menunjukkan bagaimana kesalahan-kesalahan itu terjadi gitu ya. Gitu.
Oke, terima kasih Prof. Dam. Mungkin Bapak Ibu yang punya niat untuk S2 di UPI ya, Prof ya, bisa
Ya,
daftar nanti
ditunggu itu.
akan bertemu dengan Prof. Dam karena beliau juga pembimbing tesis saya dulu di UPI. Oke, baik Prof. Dam, kita masih punya 7 menit dan tersisa 2 pertanyaan lagi. Pertama dari ada Bu Vidya. Prof, kebetulan saya mengajar di jenjang SD reguler dan saya mendapatkan siswa fase B yang problemnya belum bisa membaca dan belum bisa fokus khususnya saat membaca. Nah, bagaimana Prof tips dan triknya di kelas untuk mengajarkan siswa yang seperti ini? Terima kasih.
Oke. Penjelasannya sebetulnya akan kembali kepada yang tadi gitu ya. Hanya mungkin proses mengaksesnya ada yang bisa panjang, ada yang bisa pendek gitu kan. Tergantung pada keberadaan kondisi anak. Nah, apalagi kalau disertai misalkan kurang fokus gitu kan. Nah, jangan-jangan terlalu banyak gitu kan uh, aspek yang direspon oleh anak sehingga anak menjadi tidak fokus pada satu tugas yang sedang diselesaikan itu. Nah, kalau itu jadi masalah juga jangan terlalu banyak tuh media yang disajikan karena itu justru akan mengganggu. Singkirkan semua itu. Tetapi tetap kalau saya cek dulu itu kan. Karena tidak selalu 2 aspek itu. Mungkin saja hanya pada aspek kronologis misalkan atau mungkin saja hanya pada aspek visual yang menjadi masalah itu apakah pada kronologis pada semua item aspek itu atau tidak karena tidak semua pada anak tunagrah kita setelah dicek itu ternyata hanya pada fonemik dan sintaksis yang paling menonjol itu pada aspek yang lain tidak terlalu besar tapi punya korelasi tetap. Nah, di situ kan artinya ketika kita melakukan intervensi, tidak semua aspek dari fonologis harus diajarkan. Tidak semua juga aspek dari visual itu harus diajarkan. Jadi mungkin dari 4 aspek hanya ada satu di fonologi. Mungkin juga pada persepsi visual hanya satu. Jadi belum tentu. Tetapi untuk bisa menentukan bergeraknya harus dari mana dulu, sepanjang ini tidak diketahui, itu akan terjadi kesulitan. Oke, enggak kita bareng-bareng riset ya untuk membuktikan gitu ya.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih, Prof. Dang. Terakhir, pertanyaan dari Pak Agus Rindo. Apa langkah yang bisa guru lakukan di sekolah jika menemukan anak dengan masalah membaca dan berhitung atau calistung, sedangkan mereka sudah di jenjang SMP kelas 7? Bagaimana dengan waktu dan kenaikan kelasnya? Terima kasih, Prof.
Oke, mungkin perlu disimak dari apa yang dijelaskan oleh Ian Kaplan gitu ya. Itu terkait dengan bagaimana sih sistem pendidikan inklusif itu. Jadi kita tidak perlu mempersoalkan dia tidak adanya duduk di kelas berapa. Tetapi yang harus diselesaikan itu berikan sesuatu pada mereka itu sesuai dengan kapasitasnya. Boleh jadi anak itu tetap di kelas 6 atau di SMP, tapi yang diajarkan pada mereka itu mungkin setara dengan yang di kelas 2 dalam proses membaca misalkan. Jadi bagi saya tidak perlu Bapak dan Ibu merasa hero karena anak ini sudah ada di kelas 6, tapi kemampuan membacanya itu buruk, sehingga dampaknya juga terhadap pelajaran yang lain menjadi sangat rendah. Kemudian mengambil tindakan anak dikembalikan ke kelas 1 misalkan. Nah, tidak begitu dalam sistem pendidikan inklusif. Nah, sehingga kita akan mengenal dengan apa yang disebut dengan adaptasi kurikulum itu. Jadi melakukan pendekatan-pendekatan yang disesuaikan gitu kan. Jadi bukan kurikulumnya yang beradaptasi pada anak, tapi bukan anak yang harus beradaptasi pada kurikulum, tapi kurikulum yang harus beradaptasi pada anak. Jadi jangan takut bahwa itu kita akan disalahkan ketika anak ini ada di duduk katakanlah di kelas 6, tetapi masih diajarkan proses membaca permulaan. Karena itu memang kondisinya setara dan sesuai dengan apa yang dimiliki oleh anak itu. Tapi yang
Oke,
paling
baik.
utama tetap gitu kan harus temukan dulu gitu kan inti masalahnya di mana.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih, Prof. Ini tinggal 1 menit, tapi muncul lagi satu pertanyaan, Prof.
Ya,
Mungkin kita ini jawab sekalian ya, Prof ya. Oke,
iya.
dari Pak Farid, Prof, maaf izin bertanya, kebetulan saya mengajar di SD pada fase C, saya memiliki siswa yang belum bisa baca dan hitung, dan memiliki kebutuhan khusus seperti jika ia membaca tapi dia mudah lupa ketika kita menulis huruf abjad, namun ia mudah lupa huruf tersebut. Oke, pertanyaannya bagaimana cara mengatasi siswa tersebut? Intinya siswanya masih belum bisa baca dan sering lupa, Prof.
Oke. Mungkin 100 pertanyaan tentang hal masalah itu agak sulit kalau kita tidak punya data terlebih dahulu tentang apa yang menjadi faktor munculnya itu. Nah, ini barangkali persoalan asesmen ya. Itu menjadi persoalan yang sangat mendasar itu. Ada, mohon maaf, kegagalan menerjemahkan asesmen di Indonesia juga sudah gagal itu. Jadi di Indonesia yang dimaksud dengan asesmen itu menjadi identifikasi, belum menemukan akar masalahnya. Asesmen di Indonesia itu seringkali seperti tes formatif. Nah, ini kegagalan pemahaman tentang apa yang dimaksud dengan asesmen. Jadi dalam melakukan asesmen itu, Bapak dan Ibu mungkin dapat dikatakan sudah melakukan asesmen kalau sudah bisa menjawab tentang apa yang terjadi di balik kesalahan yang muncul itu. Jadi bukan melihat anak ini tidak bisa menyebutkan A-nya, gitu kan? Kalau itu identifikasi itu, tapi harus bisa menjawab kenapa anak tidak bisa menyebutkan A. Nah, baru itu melakukan asesmen yang benar. Nah, mungkin ini perlu dulu ya bagaimana sebetulnya kita melakukan asesmen supaya kita tahu persis sebetulnya apa yang akan kita bantu pada anak itu. Begitu juga dalam soal membaca. Mbak Siti barangkali ya perlu kita diskusi panjang dan barangkali juga perlu ya membicarakan soal ini karena persoalan membaca ini persoalan yang sangat krusial di Indonesia ini dan banyak kesalahan yang dilakukan dan itulah yang membuat banyak kegagalan terjadi di kita itu. Saya belum berani saja kalau Indonesia telah gagal memberikan layanan pendidikan dalam membaca itu, gitu kan. Karena dua hal, yaitu pertama terkait dengan tidak bisa diungkapnya tentang prasyarat itu dan kedua gagal dalam menerapkan metode-metode yang bagaimana seharusnya. Karena ini ada ketidakpahaman tentang seluk-beluk awal dari metode itu lahirnya dari mana, caranya harus seperti apa dan apa alasannya. Nah, ini barangkali banyak yang tidak bisa dibahas banyak gitu ya sebelum-sebelumnya itu. Kebanyakan mengajarkan membaca di Indonesia itu karena berangkat dari pengalaman waktu kita belajar membaca, kemudian diterapkan di sekarang ketika kita menjadi guru. Nah, ini menarik-menarik ya pertanyaannya. Barangkali ini perlu diskusi panjang. Mohon maaf gitu ya, hanya waktu ini yang terbatas. Tapi saya siap untuk menunggu ya teman-teman yang memang ingin mendiskusikan soal ini. Karena ini menjadi salah satu bagian concern dari yang saya pelajari terus.
Oke, baik, terima kasih Prof. Endang. Bagi Bapak Ibu yang ingin belajar tentang metode untuk mengajarkan membaca, mungkin bisa membaca textbooknya Prof. Endang tentang Mediated Learning Model in Early Reading for Children with Intellectual Disability. Mungkin bisa jadi salah satu referensi yang bisa dipakai Bapak Ibu di kelas untuk mengajar. Oke, karena keterbatasan waktu, terima kasih Prof. Endang atas penyampaian materinya. Sangat reflektif sekali dan kita bisa implementasikan di kelas.
Yuk.
Sebelum kami tutup, Prof. Dang bisa disampaikan closing statement-nya untuk para partisipan di sesi tersebut.
Kegagalan membaca bukan persoalan yang menakutkan, gitu kan, dan tidak perlu ditakutkan. Tapi persoalan kegagalan membaca adalah, bagi saya, adalah sebuah inspirasi untuk menemukan gagasan-gagasan baru, sehingga kita bisa menemukan cara-cara yang paling efektif untuk bisa diterapkan pada mereka. Itu barangkali ya.
Ya, baik, terima kasih Prof. Dang atas materinya dan juga saya sampaikan terima kasih kepada Bu Weningsih yang sudah membantu untuk mentranslatekan dari Indonesia ke bahasa Inggris. Saya sangat berterima kasih sekali atas waktu yang didedikasikan untuk sesi kali ini. Sekali lagi terima kasih Prof. Dang dan Bu Weningsih. Selamat berakhir pekan dan sehat selalu.
Oke, mohon izin ya.
Enggak, Prof. Alright, Bapak Ibu, we have the last speaker with us, Dr. Melissa Chin for now. I also already noticed that Dr. Melissa already with us. Dr. Melissa Chin, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes.
Yes, it's Dr. Melissa. Dr.
Yeah,
Melissa.
right. Yeah.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Dr. Melissa will present on cascading effects of a Tier 2 reading intervention using envelope enhancement and phonics training for children at cognitive risks for dyslexia. Dr. Melissa holds a PhD in education, specializing in disability and inclusion from the University of Waikato, New Zealand. Her work focuses on inclusive education, language acquisition, the science of reading, and developmental dyslexia. She is currently a Presidential Postdoctoral Fellow at Nanyang Technological University, NTU, Singapore, and served as section editor for the Encyclopedia of Education Innovation. Without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Melissa to give her presentation for 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A session. Dr. Melissa, time is yours.
Right. Thank you for the introduction, Maya. And thank you to Yayasan Lentera Sangga Rembo for the invitation. And thank you to you, Martha, Ian, and Prof. Endang for the talk. I'm learning so much today. So selamat pagi semua. Greetings, everyone. My work has always focused on understanding and supporting learners with diverse needs, particularly children at cognitive risk for dyslexia. So today, I'll be sharing one of the efforts my colleagues and I at NTU Singapore have invested to enhance literacy skills, especially in English language in Singapore. So in the case of our recent project, we explored the potential of envelope enhancement and phonics training to enhance auditory and also phonological processing skills in these children. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I will walk you through 3 key parts of this talk. First, what dyslexia is. Second, how we can support individuals with dyslexia through envelope enhancement and phonics. And finally, what you can do to help your child or children. So what is dyslexia? So dyslexia, like everyone, all the speakers have intimated, it's a brain-based condition that affects how the brain processes written and spoken language, particularly how we recognize words, match letters to sounds, and make sense of what we read. So Stanislas Dehaene, which is a well-known cognitive neuroscientist, and many other researchers have shown that reading isn't just about one part of the brain, it's a team effort. So multiple regions have to work together to process and understand written language. So using neuroimaging tools like fMRI, which lets us see brain activity in action, Dehaene and others have given us a window into how reading happens inside the brain. So here's a visual comparison of the left hemisphere of our brain. So on the left is a neurotypical brain, and on the right is a brain with dyslexia. So in a typical reader, 3 key areas light up reading. So first would be the Broca's area, which is located in the at the front of our brain, and it helps with articulating words and recognizing whole words. And the second part would be the parieto-temporal area, which is located above the back of the ear, and it helps to decode words and breaking them into sounds. Like, for example, k and t would be cat. So the third part would be the occipital-temporal area, which is located at the back of your brain, and it acts as a visual word form area. And on the left hemisphere, it maps letters to sounds, and on the right, it helps with word memory. So in people with dyslexia, the brain works a bit differently, and those same 3 areas don't all activate as strongly. So sometimes only one of them is doing most of the work, which is the Broca's area. So this helps explain why some children with dyslexia can speak fluently and express themselves beautifully, yet still struggle to read and write at the level you expect for their age. So with appropriate intervention like phonics, which is the training of linking phoneme to grapheme or sounds to letters, the child would be able to relate better to sound productions and also structure of the words. So Dehaene's research has demonstrated that phonics instruction establishes connections between the visual and phonological regions of the left brain, namely the parieto-temporal area and the occipital-temporal area, which are less activated. So continuous reading practice leads to brain rewiring due to the plastic nature of our brain, which is, I think, the greatest gift that God has given us, making phonics instruction the most effective approach, one of the most effective approaches to acquiring reading skills. But in the case of some children in Singapore who do receive phonics intervention, we discovered that they continuously experience reading difficulties. So why might this be the case? So some researchers believe that developmental dyslexia is actually linked to differences in auditory processing. So it's not about hearing loss. So children with dyslexia can hear just fine. But the challenge is how their brains process and interpret the sounds that they hear. So a key skill here is phoneme perception, which is the ability to tell speech sounds apart. And this skill is critical for decoding words and also developing phonological awareness. The clearer and more consistent the speech children hear, the easier it is for them to learn these sounds. But if the input is unclear or noisy, distinguishing similar sounds becomes much harder. So how do we know if a child has this kind of difficulty? So children with auditory processing differences often have fuzzier phoneme boundaries. And what I mean by that is sounds like p and b can blend together, making it harder to distinguish one from the other. So behavioral studies actually use psychoacoustic tasks or listening tasks, auditory tasks, and it shows that individuals with dyslexia often categorize phonemes less precisely than typical readers. So this means that they couldn't tell P and B, the sound P and B apart. So this all points to the need for targeted interventions that strengthen auditory processing. And one promising approach here that I'm advocating for is envelope enhancement, especially when it's paired with phonics-based training. So yeah, how can we help with individuals with dyslexia with envelope enhancement? So to understand what envelope enhancement is, I'll break it down into two main ideas, speech envelope and also neural entrainment. So bear with me. So first, speech envelope. So when we listen to someone talk, the sound isn't flat. It goes up and down as syllables start, pause, and end. So these ups and downs form what we call the temporal envelope. So you can think of it like an outline of a wave on a graph. It's like the shape of the sound. So you can look at the red waveform right here. So this is from the environment stimuli. So next would be neural entrainment. So let's just focus on the black waveform. So our brains have these natural rhythms in the auditory cortex. And when we hear speech, these rhythms try to synchronize or lock onto the rises and falls of the speech envelope. So this actually helps the brain to follow the rhythm, break down the words, and actually understand what's being said. But for children with dyslexia, neural entrainment or synchronization is often weaker. So their brains often don't lock onto the speech rhythm as precisely. And this makes it harder for them to hear the difference between similar sounds like p and b, which affects phoneme perception and can slow down reading development. So how can envelope enhancement help? So it helps to clarify speech envelope. So we can actually artificially boost the ups and downs of the speech to amplify them, making the shape of the sound more distinct for individuals with dyslexia. So this actually helps the brain to synchronize with the speech rhythm more reliably. And it also helps support listening in tricky or noisy situations. And research shows that it helps specific groups like older adults and also people with hearing challenges, enabling them to follow speech more easily and also understand better. So in the case of our study, we actually use Koning and Wouters' method with MATLAB to identify the sudden changes like the start of the sound. So we're focusing on the onset of the sound. So the red waveform here represents the enhanced envelope, and the blue waveform shows the non-enhanced audio. So for our experimental group, we made sure to amplify the speech envelope that the learner needed to acquire. So in this case, the sound p and eh in one of the stories. So by emphasizing this specific sound, the learner could focus on and listen to the target phoneme more effectively. And it has been amplified by a factor of 3.5. So let me just show you what it sounds like.
Hey there, little pals. get ready for another adventure with the cool letter sound A.
So that's the original audio.
Hey there, little pals. Get ready for another adventure with the cool letter sound A. Hey.
So with this in mind, my research aims to explore the potential of using envelope enhancement and also phonics-based instruction and investigate their effects on auditory and also phonological development in bilingual children at risk for dyslexia. And we hypothesize that EE, which is enhancement and also phonics-based instruction, will enhance auditory skills and have a cascading effect on phonological development. So in my study, children are required to, those in the experimental group, they are required to play Grapho game for about 10 minutes per day for 4 times per week. So it's in a span of 3 months. So Grapho game is a fun, interactive phonics game that helps children learn the connection between letters and sounds, which are the building blocks for reading. So by practicing these skills in short, engaging sessions, children can actually strengthen their reading and spelling in a playful and stress-free way.
Mm, mm. Mm, mm, mm.
So a substantial amount of our research time was spent on developing this auditory stories app. So we developed 24 wordless auditory stories. Each story was narrated with a Singaporean familiar with standard Singaporean English. So these stories were synchronized with Grapho game stream levels to ensure coherent introduction of the letter sounds. So for example, at level 1, Grapho game introduces the sound S. So we developed a corresponding story teaching this sound with the sound envelope enhanced. So completion of the story actually allows the child to enter a virtual hub, we will see later, where a marked star indicates progress and provides a monitoring mechanism for researchers. And each story lasts about 5 to 8 minutes. Given the short attention span children might have, we're focusing on preschoolers at the age of 5 to 6 year olds, and is followed by 2 simple questions designed to maintain engagement. So yeah. So this is where they can customize their avatars, and this is designed to maintain engagement. And the circles or the bubbles are there to are representing different stories, and this is one of the stories that they've entered.
There, little pals, get ready for another exciting journey with the letter sound. Are you ready? Let's go. Pam, the clever monkey. Pam is a funny monkey.
So yeah, so we worked with 53 bilingual preschoolers who have heightened risk for dyslexia, and they were randomly assigned to one of 3 groups. So we have the GGEE group, about 17 of them. They received Grapho game with the letter sounds envelope enhanced. And the next group will be the GGNE that received Graphogame with non-enhanced stories, about 18 of them. And then we have a control group that received a control game and also non-envelope enhanced letter sounds. So we ensured block randomization made sure that the groups were similar in age, sex, nonverbal IQ, and language background, and all of them were considered at heightened risk for dyslexia because they scored below the 30th percentile on 2 key reading-related tests. So we actually use CTOP2, Tower2, and RAD5, and these are widely recognized as the gold standard for reading assessments. And the study followed a quasi-experimental design so we test, train, and then we have 2 more tests. It follows that configuration, and children completed reading tests and phonemic categorization tasks specially adapted for Singapore, and the interval 3 months. So what are the results telling us? So we measured the trigger test is represented by the blue slopes, the post-test is represented by red slopes, and the consolidation test is represented by the green slopes. So on the graph, you will see that a steeper and more curved slopes means better performance on telling P and B apart. So what stands out is that the GGEE group that received Graphogame and envelope enhancement improved the most, showing that this combination can actually enhance auditory processing skills. But so based on these slopes, linear mixed effects modeling showed that the GGEE group demonstrated the most significant gains, underscoring the potential of this combined approach. And this group outperformed the Graphogame, just the phonics training alone, and the control group. So the GGNE group improved from time 1 to time 2 and time 1 to time 3, but not so much from time 2 to time 3, while the control group showed no significant changes at all. So we wanted to look at the effects on phonological processing skills. So we look at 6 phonological domains. We have phonological awareness, phonological memory, rapid automatized naming, sight word efficiency, phonemic decoding efficiency, and also spelling. So linear mixed effect modeling revealed that the GGEE group showed consistent improvements across all 6 phonological domains, while the GGNE group, they showed moderate but significant gains in 3 areas, showing that phonics alone is enough, good enough, but with the combination of the envelope enhancement, it would yield more superior results. And while the control group showed some improvement trends across some domains, but none actually reached statistical significance. So again, this highlights the potential of phonics training using Graphogame and also envelope enhanced stories. And I also wanted to see that if improving auditory processing would have a cascading effect on phonological development. So I did a path analysis, and it showed that the GGNE intervention significantly boosted the children's auditory skills, even for those who started with lower scores. So this improvement then carried over to almost all areas of phonological development, except for rapid automatized naming. So the effects were moderate to large, suggesting that strengthening auditory processing can actually help children compensate for weaker neural entrainment and support their reading skills in different ways. So this is what we found. EE and phonics intervention actually boost auditory and phonological processing, and early auditory gains actually create compensatory pathways that reduce some phonological vulnerabilities. So this is what you can do to help your child or children. Graphogame is actually downloadable on Google Play or Apple Store. So you can play it for about, you can have your child or children play it for about 10 minutes per day for 4 times a week. And I am in the midst of asking permission from NTU Singapore to release Letter Sounds Adventure. Once it's available for download on Google Play and Apple Store, you can actually use it for about 5 minutes per day, which 5 minutes means like a story. So for 4 times a week. So it's important that you sit with your child while they play. Your presence matters. This actually aligns with what Martha and Ian have said, that while educational game can be very successful, provided that there's active facilitation by parents or teachers. So and then what you can do is encourage conversation about what they're learning. Ask questions like, which letter did you just learn? Or can you say the sound for this letter? And it's important to support, but not do it for them. So let them try the games first, but step in and only step in if they're stuck. And also, it's important to celebrate small wins to keep motivation high. So by being actively involved, you're not just helping them to play the game, you're actually helping them to strengthen reading and sound skills every day. So this is the gift of literacy. It brings forth numerous benefits, as you can see from this slide. And by recognizing the profound impact of literacy, we can actually appreciate its capacity to empower individuals and shape a brighter future for them. So thank you for your attention. I would welcome any questions. They will inevitably assist me with this work.
All right, thank you, Dr. Melissa, for the insightful presentation. I'm always thinking that the opportunity for the teacher in Indonesia to use your game, I think it will be useful for the English teacher in Indonesia to adopt in their learning in the classroom. So I'm also waiting for the available of the game on the Google Apps or the Apple Store. So it will be a great news if once it's available on the Play Store or the App Store. All right, Bapak Ibu, if you have any question for Dr. Melissa, you can raise your hand or you can post a question on the Zoom chat. All right. We have Bu Vina who already raised her hand. Bu Vina, you can unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Hi, Fina. I remember you.
Dr. Melissa, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Okay, so I have a question here. So I'm wondering, can we teach students with dyslexia second language, considering that English has become a second language in many regions? If so, how should we teach a second language for students with dyslexia? What steps should we do, or what things should we concern to teach a second language to students with dyslexia? Thank you so much, Dr. Melissa.
No problem. So it's important, I think, like Ian said previously, that it's important to tailor your specific interventions, especially evidence-based intervention, to your context. Like, for example, like what I did in my research, we realized that we couldn't use existing app because the accent would be different. So what we did was, in order to narrate it and to tailor it to the context in Singapore, we made sure to use a narrator, a professional narrator. So we actually use the help from a student from the National University of Singapore to actually help us narrate in standard Singaporean English, so that these children, those with and without dyslexia, would not be confused with the sounds that are associated to the letters. Yeah. So that's one important thing that you can consider. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dr. Melissa. Is that clear for you, Bu Vina?
Yeah, it answered my question. Thank you so much, Dr. Melissa.
Oh, no
All
problem.
right, thank you, Bu Vina. Anyone else? Bapak Ibu silakan bisa angkat tangan untuk menyampaikan pertanyaan atau tulis di kolom Zoom chat. Anyone else? Bapak Ibu? All right. I'm also learn a lot from your research, Dr. Melissa, and I'm curious about the next step for your research. What your future, like, what your suggestion for the next researcher, based on your findings?
Thank you for your question. That's a very good one. Because currently I'm putting in another proposal. So what we're just looking here is just something that's behavioral that can be seen with behavioral. So what we're looking at, we're thinking about using neurocognitive intervention. So we're using neuroimaging tools like FNIRS to actually see what's actually happening in the brain when we're using GraphoGame together with envelope enhancement, so that we could actually share with scientific communities what are some of the biological markers that we can see based on what's happening, when we say it's to compensate for, weaker neural entrainment. Is that true or not? So that's our next step. And another thing would be the second one, which I've been in conversation with Dr. Ranti. We're thinking of using this app as for cross-cultural trial. We're seeing if it's useful in the Indonesian context or not. So that would be the second thing. And that would be
All
so
right.
far that's it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm excited to, waiting the findings between collaboration you and Bu Ranti. Maybe I will contact her or reach out her once you already finished with the collaboration. That's
Yes.
really interesting to know about the cross-cultural result within the implementation of the game. All right, we have another question, Bu Melissa from
Okay.
Bakina. How we differentiate visual processing disorder and dyslexia, and
right.
how visual processing influence children with dyslexia.
Okay, thank you, Fina, again for the question. My area would be because I'm doing sound engineering and auditory processing, auditory processes. So I'm afraid that I might not be the right person to ask about visual processing disorder. So yeah.
All right, thank you for the answer, Dr. Melissa. Anyone else wanna ask something to Dr. Melissa about the game, about the dyslexia?
Yes, I think Martha asked a question. Have you thought also about asking the children for their feedback? So we actually have a post-intervention questionnaire. We also published a paper on their feedback. So most of these children were interested in the app, but they were also like some other things that could be improved according to these children would be, which was very helpful. And this leads to my next future research, where we're trying to the current app right now is linear in progression. What I mean by that would be that they would have to finish one story to get to the other story. So we're trying to incorporate machine learning so that the app tailors to what the child is good at or what the child needs more support in. So that would be one thing that the child have what one of the children have shared. And yes, and another thing that one of the caveat of this research is that they were actually confused because we were actually using GraphoGame and it's only available in British English and also American English. So we decided to choose British English because in the Singaporean context, what we're following is the standard British English rather than standard Singaporean English. And they were confused as to how certain letter was sound. Like, for example, the letter sound would be in British, but it would sound like in Singapore. So that's one of the feedback that we've received as well. So we're thinking about collaborating with Graphogame. It's one of the Finnish developers to create more a different version of English so that it could, cater to the diverse needs of learners with different accents.
All right, thank
Yeah, and
you.
it does come out very much in the vowel sounds, particularly. So I'm very glad you're asking them. Many times children are very honest and they will tell you. And I profited a lot from that honesty. And as I say, I learned from the children. So, this is why I think researchers should also be asking. Of course, I know there are all kinds of parental control and so on. You have to be sensitive to those things, but it's always good if a child is willing to give you the feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Melissa, for your response. It's glad to hear that you involve a student to improve your game. And you have one message from Budiana that she hope that she can get the game sample for the dyslexia in Bahasa Indonesia, like how to use the game to teach the word or sentences in Bahasa Indonesia. Hope a teacher in Indonesia can access the game soon or shortly, and we can try to use the app that you share in today's session.
Yes, that's right. And based on Prof. Endang's presentation, I hope that I'm not translating Indonesian wrongly in my mind. I'm learning that phonics is not really applicable with Indonesian language, so Bahasa Indonesia. So that would be one area where, we would need to collaborate, Professor
Yeah,
Endang.
maybe next research, you can develop or create one game that it's initially to a children with dyslexia, but in Indonesia context. So it's more doable to implement in the Indonesian classroom.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Melissa, for the response. I think the session with Dr. Melissa is over. As we conclude our session with Dr. Melissa, we are taking away meaningful lesson and a clearer perspective on the subject. And also note one key takeaway about how the speech envelope works. It can clarity speech, and then the student can focus on target phoneme effectively. Before we officially close this session, I would like to invite Dr. Melissa to deliver the closing statement for our audience.
Okay. So to reiterate, dyslexia is not a lack of ability, but a difference in how children learn. When we design literacy instruction that is evidence-based, inclusive, and responsive to these differences, we don't just improve reading outcomes, we also open doors to confidence, participation, and also lifelong learning. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Dr. Melissa, for the insightful presentation and sharing for today's session. Thank you once again for your time and enjoy your weekend.
And thank you, the entire team, for helping us give our presentations. So
thank you.
I know that puts a lot of coordination and a lot of effort behind the scenes. So thank you so much.
All right, Bapak Ibu, we have already learned from all the speakers in today's webinar. It's such an honor for me to have an opportunity to lead this discussion, and I appreciate your active participation during the session. This also brings my session to a close. Now I invite our MC to resume the program and proceed with the next agenda. Thank you, everyone, and stay healthy.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much to our moderator and all of our amazing speakers today. It's very insightful presentations and meaningful discussion today. So please, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the end of our international webinar. So on behalf of organizing committee, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to all speakers for sharing your expertise, and our moderator, Ms. Maya, for leading the discussions wonderfully, and all participants from various countries for joining us today. So before you leave, please remember to fill out the attendance form that our committee has shared in Zoom chat. Your presence and feedback mean a lot to us. And before we end today's event, we would like to share a brief announcement for everyone. Please stay tuned for upcoming program from the Lentera Sangga Rainbow Foundations early next year, from maybe around January, through the Chana projects, which is one of our flagship initiative. We look forward to your continued participations and support. Lastly, we invite everyone to join our documentation session today. Please turn on your camera. Yes, please give your best pose. Let's capture this moment together. 3, 2, 1. Once more. 3, 2, 1. Okay, last one. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you once again for being with us. Before we conclude, we sincerely hope that everyone stay healthy and well, especially in these challenging and unpredictable weather conditions. And we also take a moment to keep our thoughts and prayers with our brother and sister who are currently affected by natural disaster. May they be granted strength, safety, and resilience during this difficult time. So wishing you a wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. We look forward to welcoming you again at our next event. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.